Hi, on behalf of Bayerisches Staatsballett, I would like to welcome you to another audio introduction. My name is Christoph Gaiser, and during the next 20 minutes or so, I would like to dig a little deeper and to enhance your experience once you can watch one of our shows of the ballet entitled Le Parc. Perhaps you have heard the saying, "It is not good that the man should be alone." If you're familiar with the Holy Bible, you may know that this statement can be found in the Old Testament in the book of Genesis. I will not go into the context of this biblical passage any further. Instead, I would like to ask you, dear listener, a question. Are you alone right now? Or, to be a bit more obtrusive, are you currently single? Or is there someone in your life, a significant other? If there is someone in your life, then I have a follow-up question for you. How did you guys get to know each other? Depending on your age, the culture in which you grew up, and your social environment, the answer is likely to vary. Perhaps you met someone through an app. Perhaps someone approached you in a bar or in a club. Perhaps a mutual friend introduced you to one another. Or perhaps your families arranged a marriage. As you can see, there are many possibilities. Whichever way the two of you came together, or perhaps even the three of you or more, you can surely imagine that there were times when it was not as easy as it is today to meet someone or to approach someone. And with that, we're arriving at the subject of Le Parc. This ballet is about how people are getting closer to one another. It is about the game of approach and rejection, about interest, flirtation, and seduction. The ballet Le Parc was created by Angelin Preljocajs. He was born and raised in France, although his family roots lie in an Albanian-speaking region of the Balkans, in what is now Montenegro. Angelin Preljocajs became known as a choreographer in the field of contemporary dance. In 1984, he founded his own company, which is today based in Aix-en-Provence, France. In 1994, he was invited to choreograph a work for the ballet of the Paris Opera House. This is one of the best-known and most traditional ballet companies in the world, dedicated to the preservation of classical dance. It was therefore a great honor for Angelin Preljocajs, but also a great challenge. As always, when Preljocajs works with a company other than his own, he began the conceptual phase by considering whom exactly he had before him. In this case, a group of young people who, however, belonged to an institution steeped in an impressive tradition. Ultimately, the ballet of the Paris Opera traces its origins back to the ballet at the court of the French kings. Perhaps you're now thinking of the dancing king Louis XIV, the Sun King. Perhaps you're thinking of the music of Jean-Baptiste Lully. So something is clearly pointing backwards, towards the era of the Baroque. At that time, dance at court reflected the social order. At the center stood the king. The members of the court danced along, each person in his or her assigned place. This was the image Angelin Preljocajs had in mind when he began his work for the ballet of the Paris Opera House, and he found it attractive to use this image as the base for his conception of the work. His goal was to create a dance language in which his own contemporary movement vocabulary, the vocabulary of classical ballet, and the vocabulary of Baroque court dance would merge organically with one another. In order to better structure his thoughts and to shape the structure of the piece, Preljocajs read several French novels from the 17th century. For example, works by Madeleine de Scudéry, Marie-Madeleine de Lafayette, and Pierre-Ambroise François Choderlos de Laclos. And based on the way these works depicted the themes of courtship and seduction, he decided to conceive his piece as a story ballet. The female protagonist in Le Parc is a courtier. She is part of a game governed by many unwritten rules. A man cannot simply walk up to a woman he likes. A woman, even less so, cannot simply approach a man she likes. Courtship takes place in subtle ways. A glance, a gesture with a fan, perhaps a very brief touch. Our female protagonist takes part in this game, and there is indeed someone she likes, and who quite obviously likes her as well. He seems to take the whole affair a little more lightly, but then again, he is a man, and can allow himself greater liberties. She, on the other hand, is torn between conflicting feelings. So much for the initial situation. We see that two people, a man and a woman, have established a connection. Over the course of the 3 acts, we are shown how the relationship between them changes and develops. Yet, this is not a ballet for just 2 people. The storyline unfolds against the backdrop of a larger group, the court society. The king, I can already reveal this, does not appear in this piece. We remain within the sphere of the courtiers. From today's perspective, we may say that this group is privileged. Everyone who belongs to this group is free from material concerns and can devote themselves to observing one another, gossiping among themselves, and making advances toward others. Now, I would like to say a few words about the title of the ballet, Le Parc. Based on everything you know about the piece so far, this title should not seem too mysterious. It concerns the game of courtship and seduction at court. Where there is a court, there is a palace, and where there is a palace, there is always a garden or a park. Whether you think of Nymphenburg Palace here in Munich, Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna, or indeed the Palace of Versailles, there is always a vast, meticulously maintained park with gravel paths and carefully trimmed trees and plants. It is therefore no wonder that Angelin Preljocajs sets all the 3 acts of his ballet in a palace park, albeit at different times of the day. In Thierry Le Proust's stage design, you will be noticing an element of abstraction. In other words, Le Proust took up the fact that in the garden art of the Baroque era, at least in French gardens, plants were shaped into orderly forms. The parks are laid out symmetrically, and all visual axes are leading toward the palace and thus toward the ruler, the center of power. The plants themselves are being subjected to this strict order. The straight line is the ideal, and even when ornamentation appears, everything must still adhere to order. For a palace park to appear as immaculate as described earlier on, a group of gardeners is being required. Gardeners are servants, and as such, they must remain invisible to the courtiers and especially to the king. They, therefore, have to carry out their work while the noble ladies and gentlemen pursue other pleasures, or while they are asleep. In Angelin Preljocajs' ballet Le Parc, however, those responsible for maintaining the gardens are visible for men. They carry neither rakes nor pruning shears. With their aprons and protective goggles, they could just as easily be blacksmiths. They appear somewhat as though they had traveled from the future to the place where the story unfolds. The music also contributes to this impression. Goran Vejvoda composed the music for the appearances of the four gardeners. It is electronically generated, and it sounds mechanical, industrial, perhaps even futuristic. And the movements Angelin Preljocajs choreographed for the four gardeners are bearing the closest and clearest connection to contemporary dance. At the beginning of Le Parc, one might get the impression that the four gardeners keep their distance from court society, operating behind the scenes. But in the second act, we'll be seeing that they do interact, at least with the ladies of the court. More on that later. We have already spoken about the gardeners' music, but now we should also discuss the music accompanying the actions of the courtiers. Angelin Preljocajs could have chosen music from the Baroque era, but instead, he selected music that still carries echoes of the Baroque, while already stylistically advancing into the realm of what is known as Viennese classicism. All the music accompanying the courtiers comes from Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. His music provides every mood Angelin Preljocajs needed for his piece. The cheerful and the dance-like, the emotional and the intimate, but also the strict and the orderly, exemplified here in the fugue in C minor, number 546 in the Köchel catalogue, which fittingly underscores a section entitled Mutual Observation. Let us return to the three acts of Le Parc and to the way the story of our protagonists unfolds and develops, embedded within the activities of the court society. In the first act, everything is still highly formal. Ladies and gentlemen are made to resemble one another through their clothing and through their wigs. Everyone is wearing knee breeches, and everyone's legs are being visible. Whether seated in chairs or standing upright, they are observing, assessing, and exchanging glances. Everyone's keeping their distance, and everyone is revealing little of themselves. The first act concludes with a pas de deux between the two protagonists. It is choreographed to the slow movement of the piano concerto in E-flat major, number 449 of the Köchel catalogue. Here, mutual attraction naturally plays the central role, but equally important is the question of respect. The male protagonist wishes to seduce the female protagonist, yet he remains attentive to the boundaries she sets for him. In the second act, bright daylight has given way to dusk. We first see the gardeners and may ask ourselves whether they are really only tending the garden, or whether they are perhaps also pulling certain strings concerning the interactions within the courtiers. After the gardeners disappear, we see the ladies of the court, now dressed in wide skirts made of brightly patterned fabrics, designed by costume designer Hervé Pierre. The women's legs are hidden, making their bodies seem to glide across the floor. The costumes influence movement. Unlike the tight-fitting costumes of the first act, the ladies no longer have complete control here. Hoop skirts and hats are being restrictive, though in a somewhat elegant manner. Yet it is not long before the ladies return wearing only underskirts. Under the cover of darkness, what would have seemed unthinkable in broad daylight can now take place. Ladies and gentlemen actually are coming together, though in the form of a game of hide and seek. Seduction is lurking almost certainly behind the next tree. The female protagonist appears exempt from this game, which is also reflected in her costume. She continues to wear the dress with the hoop skirt. But at the end of the second act, she is being led in by the four gardeners, wearing a blindfold and without the hoop skirt. Our suspicion has therefore been confirmed. The gardeners are not mere observers. Another pas de deux follows, once again choreographed to a slow movement from a Mozart piano concerto. Yet, although the mutual attraction between our two protagonists cannot be denied, although the sense of coming together hangs palpably in the air, the female protagonist does not feel ready. She rejects the advances of the man courting her. When the curtain rises at the beginning of Act 3, it is a star-filled night. The female protagonist lies on the ground, while the four gardeners stand around her. She has fallen asleep, and the gardeners accompany her on her dream journey. Angelin Preljocajs has stated that this dream brings the female protagonist's clarity regarding the male protagonist's advances. We may therefore assume that the next and third encounter will bring about a major change. It is also remarkable that the physical contact of the gardeners leaves traces on the female protagonist. From this point onward, she too performs movements previously reserved for the gardeners. Whether the gardeners are acting on behalf of a higher power, perhaps with Cupid, the god of love, as their master, as might be the case in a Baroque opera, this remains unresolved. Four court ladies come into view. Their dresses are less expansive than at the beginning of the second act, yet the black of their skirts conveys a certain strictness. At the same time, these skirts are transparent, making the women's legs visible once more. After that, five gentlemen, who are joined by the male protagonist, are having a moment to themselves. Then, ladies and gentlemen once again are coming together. And now, the four gardeners are leading in the female protagonist, bringing her towards the male protagonist. They loosen her white hoop skirt and let it slip to the ground, so that the two protagonists now stand before each other in undergarments. It is time, then, for the third pas de deux. Angelin Preljocajs also took his time with this pas de deux. Laurent Hilaire, for whom the choreographer created the male lead, recalls that this decisive sequence was only created a few days before the opening night. As a result, he and Isabelle Guérin, who danced the female lead, had enough time to immerse themselves in the universe of the piece and to get to know one another, physically as well as mentally. According to Laurent Hilaire, this made it possible simply to surrender themselves to the situation. And so they fulfilled the choreographer's task of creating a, quote, flying kiss, unquote, for this scene, entirely to his satisfaction. The female protagonist has overcome her inner resistance. She is the one who initiates the kiss, deliberately, insistently, and with self-determination. And thanks to the numerous turns of the male lead, made possible through the mutual trust of the two dancers, the ballerina's legs are lifting from the ground. Gravity itself appears to vanish, at least for a few seconds. This is what ballet can look like when it has the objective to express what can be somewhat pathetically be called surrender. Yet this moment of finding each other after going back and forth is not the end of the piece. You may already suspect it. The four gardeners appear once more, and they remain shrouded in mystery. What their next mission may be, whether they will be helping people or perhaps other beings to come together in another place and maybe in another time, we simply do not know. We have reached the end of our audio introduction. I hope that my remarks have been helpful to you in understanding Angelin Preljocajs' ballet Le Parc. Please stay with us and feel free to tune in again sometime. My name is Christoph Gaiser, and I thank you very much indeed for listening.